Well, we are now several weeks into the RaceKraft V8 Veterans Championship for season number 20. 3 weeks have been passed, and that's a few, so 4. It's got to be a several, right, as we head to... This is actually probably one of my second favourite track anywhere for road courses. Obviously, I've got a few ovals that I think are a little bit better than this place, but hey, that's always up for debate. Interlagos, in between lakes, as it means in the language, is the home of tonight's racing action. And it's a 200-kilometre race here that's got trials, it's got tribulations, it's got elevation change. It nearly feels a little bit like a stretched out Bathurst, if you will. If you could take the top section of Bathurst with the elevation changes and move the walls back a little bit, Haynes, I think you'd go pretty close to what this place is.
Yeah, it's a really good track. Used to have a lot more length to it. It's been chopped up a little bit for the modern Grand Prix layout that, well, I guess we've known for maybe closer to 30 years now, but a long F1 history here in Brazil, and particularly here at Sao Paulo.
We're going to be journeying to the southern side of the equator, our side of the equator, where it is currently winter over in Interlagos. Just down to the south of Sao Paulo, it's home to this phenomenal little piece of racetrack. And as you can see, as we twist around this circuit north, is currently about up to the top left-hand corner of that screen. So... and then the track flips on me, so you try and locate yourself in. But it is going to be a 4.3 kilometre, 15-turn affair. Does have 2 layouts on iRacing. I didn't know that there was a second layout to this place until very, very recently when the Toyota 86 official series actually went here in the last season, so I learned something about that. It's called the Moto layout. It has a tiny chicane in between turn 13 and turn 14, and you can actually see it on that track map up there. But that flat map, Dave, that the elevation change around this place, there is no equivalent to just driving laps on the circuit, and even in the sim you can feel the rise and fall of this place.
Yeah, and even the fall off in the runoff on the outside of turn 4 there at Descida do Lago, and then of course getting the traction up the hill out of Junção, which no one who isn't Portuguese speaking can ever pronounce correctly. I've tried a million times and been told I'm wrong by proper educated Brazilians, but I'll keep getting it wrong confidently. But yeah, that elevation change out of 1 on the outside of turn 4, heading up the hill there through all the other places, even turn 9 there, you're in a bit of a roller coaster there through the middle sector of the race lap.
Yeah, it does feel like that. I mean, the big key is they refer to Portimao really as the roller coaster. This place, I think, nearly deserves about that amount, if not more.
This is the kiddie coaster. You don't have to be 140 centimetres. 120 centimetres to ride will do.
Do they have a version that I can drive around in bumper cars is probably the question I'll be asking for. Righto, what do the championship standings look a little bit like as we transition into tonight's round? Sorry, my apologies. We're going to jump into the race info and have a little bit of a chat about what it's going to look like. So for you, David Haynes, who, probably you haven't been on as much V8 Supercar coverage in the recent past, the current format generically is that you're going to require a 2 compulsory pit stop race. That can only happen after the end of lap number 2. So at the very end of lap number 2, you can pit under that condition. You have to serve the entirety of lap number 1 on the racetrack. If the safety car comes out before we get to the end of lap number 1, that pit lane window will not open until the safety car has peeled back in and we've done a full racing lap under green flag. Critical lap for your second stop number is lap 13 to 14, but what does that look like in terms of fuel? Fixed setup for the V8 veterans. A reminder to you guys seeing along at home, 50 litres goes into the starting tank, a gap of 61 litres of the full 100% tank available to the drivers here tonight. Fuel burn in the 3.2 to 3.3 range, about 101 to 106 litres per lap. So that's all the juicy goodies about the gas and go mileage there, Dave. A fair bit of fuel to add there, and that's what they look like on the graph.
Yeah, your options being stopping early, stopping as soon as the critical number, versus running it long as you can, versus a strategy somewhere in the middle. We'll keep an eye on exactly how it happens, but of course you really open up your strategy options with an early stop if there's traffic, or if you're somewhere further down the back where taking an early stop won't put you into traffic.
Yeah, and I think the big key has been with these big V8 supercars we always talk about in terms of GT racing, and particularly the smaller varieties of cars that obviously you and I have commentated a fair bit of together, is how much that fuel load actually does add on to your lap time. So yeah, look, I mean, the big key is keeping that car light and nimble. If you've got track position, well, you can sacrifice a little bit for fuel strategy. If you've got not a lot of track position, sometimes giving yourself a light, nimble car in the middle into that race gives you options as a driver.
Yeah, so definitely the two stops, but with some broad options depending on whether you're, towards the front of the field, towards the tail end of the field, however it all shakes out after lap one. How you are at lap one might not necessarily be your qualifying position, and that qualifying, I think, is almost done.
Indeed it is. Qualifying's got about 2 minutes and 20 seconds left to come to us, but that's enough about the race info for right now. So we'll jump on to what is next in terms of our pre-race graphics, and I think you're going to see a lot. We're going to go ahead and check in with our driver of the day from last week, and it was a big old drive through the field to move himself inside the top 10 that made the decision. The Chubby Buns Burgers driver of the day. Well, for split one last week, it was Rob Crisdale who made a significant amount of positions throughout the entirety of the race, and the critical factor to him receiving driver of the day was he made it to the top 10. There was another driver that was very, very close who finished just outside the top 10, but David, it is cracking it into that top 10. You can have a great day, but having a great day in terms of overtaking and making a top 10 for me is absolutely a little bit of a difference in terms of the way you go about, how you valued the day at the end of it.
Yeah, are you in the racing for the love of the racing? Are you in the racing for, the love of the results? A little bit of both is great, but I reckon we do look across a lot of leagues, gentlemen, and you're looking for good racing, and that's when you feel like you're getting back what you invest into.
Yeah, and for Rob Crisdale, it was good to chat to him as well. You could hear how he was feeling about his racing thus far this season, and the improvements, and also the slide that he's been on as well. Ups and down, season soars sometimes. Righto, we're now going to jump through, as we say farewell to the Chubby Buns Burgers Driver of the Day recap. And I tell you what, Dave, are you a burger guy? Are you much of a burger guy?
Oh, I've eaten a burger or two.
I tell you what, the next time I'm going to Sydney, I cannot wait to actually go and try out Chubby Buns. It's been on my to-do list, and it's just never lined up. I'm going next time I'm in Sydney, which might be in a couple of weeks' time, so we'll see. Right, we're going to jump to, I believe we're going to have a quick look at what the championship points standings look like at this point in time, and the reason that we're going to do that is qualifying's not quite over. We're about 15-20 seconds away from jumping through. Okay, so we're going to go to the track information, I believe, for this one, and have a look at the graphic right there. The Sao Paulo, that's the back end of the grandstand that looks down over turn 1, turn 2. So your ratings, the driver rating scale that came down in information, what we're getting from the drivers, tyre wear, very high. In between 4 and 5, that's in the very high range for me, right towards the top end of town. Everybody that had to respond here tonight to the fuel saving ability, there's actually a lot of fuel saving ability to cut time out of those pit stops. Strategy variety is still in the reasonably high range. However, your overtaking options, which may subtract from the ability to give yourself an edge in terms of strategy, right on about the mid-team. Track difficulty right in the middle of it. There is a lot of rise and fall throughout the track as well. Safety car chance, we're actually estimating quite high here tonight, which is interesting because I thought that this place would probably have a little bit more space, and confidence levels medium high there, Dave. So everyone's sort of saying, yeah, there's a lot going on in this little racetrack here tonight.
Yeah, so I mean, you talk about drivers are rating the strategy variation as higher than the overtaking options. I think a high chance of safety cars often can give you some race strategy variety. Occasionally a late one will just bring everyone back onto the same strategy, but I think if they think, oh, there's not going to be a whole lot of overtaking on track, that means, I'll preserve my track position, I'll try to pit late, whatever, then the chance of safety cars maybe opens up some of that.
And I think the other key that we see a lot of strategy variety that starts to come into things is that tires is a big thing. As soon as you've got a high tire wear rating, that all of a sudden that spreads your strategies right out, because people want to give themselves as much option as well. And the other thing is, if people have already done their 2 compulsory pit stops and there's a late safety car, you're going to see a spread in who comes down for tires and who doesn't, because track position overtaking, particularly with a low overtaking opportunity, says, yeah, okay, there's actually an opportunity to stay out on older rubber and maintain position, if not gain out of it.
Yep, and 47 laps for all of that to work through when we get racing. I like this sort of just an estimate based on the drivers, how they feel the race is going to play out, what characteristics of the circuit their thinking is going to affect their race, how they approach it, and what they expect to get out of it.
Righto, so ladies and gents, we are now about 2 minutes and 20 seconds through the warm-up session at the moment, so I can tell you a lot of drivers out on track at the moment doing practice starts. That getting away, the run out of turn number 1, talk me through the run out of turn number 1 at this place, Dave, because the track falls away from you, but it's very, very wide at the entry to turn 1 and then significantly narrow between turn 2 and turn 3. Doing that as a driver, putting yourself on the outside of turn number 1 has a lot of ability to set yourself up for disaster at turn 2.
Yeah, and you gotta start at the start as well. The grid boxes stretch a long way back down the hill, and it is down the hill from that starting position there. So some boxes are on a bigger incline than others. And then, of course, as you point out, it is an interesting sort of turn 1, 2, 3 section here, where you think about turn 1 as a great overtaking opportunity, but it does kind of tighten up, and your normal racing line takes you to a really late apex that kind of initially in the corner leaves you exposed to someone wanting to show their nose down there.
It's deciding whether or not how long you want to be on the curbs on the left-hand side, because you can wrap that curb on the left-hand side at turn number 1. Righto, what does the championship look like in terms of standings at the moment? What's the pictures after last week? Well, for Scott Gamble, he's now got himself a 44-point lead. There is 2 drop rounds to come as a part of this, because, again, everyone's got lives and everyone wants to go racing at the same time. That does mean that this may change as the season progresses. Blake Delaney has moved his way into 2nd place in terms of the championship standings. Reasonable night out last week at Road America. Nothing over the top, but good finishes will get you there. Michael Whiting's, the 2 Fishy Motorsports cars, sit 2 and 3. Michael Stewart's having a great season, again, right up there in terms of points contention, and has done just about everything right. It's had 3 clean races to start the season. Ken Latta made a big mistake back at Detroit Belle Isle in terms of the strategy. He missed out, and now his points are starting to suffer. And the big news out of that camp as well, Ken Latta will need to take both drop rounds as 0 pointers. Will not be able to make 2 of the 10 rounds that would be on this championship 4. Michael Taliancic is resurging in terms of things and finding himself again in 6th. As for Dean Favell, now down in 7th WKMP SimSports, is actually having a really quiet season at the office. Chris Miller's been a little bit all over the place. Damien Cairns much the same, and Stephen Kennedy round out your top 10. But have a look at how close it is, basically from 6th place down to 10th place there, David Haynes. That's only 23 points in that one.
Yeah, and even close, like sort of 4th to 5th there. So you've got a lot to play for, and try to aim for your consistent results. Even if you know you're going to potentially drop some of your worst results, still seems like a field where consistency of your best results is going to be important.
Yeah, indeed it is. And as the warm-up session now finishes, the drivers are going to be starting to go through their final process to get in. And the starting grid is going to look like this. It was a man who looked incredibly confident in terms of practice lap times. He was 3/10 clear in terms of practice. Didn't match his practice lap time. That's okay. Still good enough to take away pole position. So first box checked for defending champion Scott Gamble. Off alongside of him, Michael Taliancic, his best qualifying performance in a reasonably good time. Could he finally try and challenge and take an outright win? We'll have to see. Matt Vanderkrant has been the king of qualifying thus far this season. Has been really consistent yet again. It's the long run pace in terms of the race, which is his big struggle street. Brenton Nietzsche will start off alongside of him in one of his better qualifying performances for the season. Moving back to row number 3, Blake Delaney off alongside of John Latham. John Latham was in potentially a race-winning position last week, made a huge mistake where he oversped on the way to pit lane, cost him a race win. He'll be keen to snatch his first win in a very long time tonight. Michael Whiting and Travis Hunt on 7th and 8th. They've both been reasonably consistent, waiting, sitting in a good spot in the points. 9th and 10th, though, David Nash qualifies inside the top 10 for his first time in a very long time. Off alongside of him is Chad Lewis. We'll move it back to row number 6, Brad Dobler and Damien Cairns in this one. Greg Sharp and Stephen Kennedy on row number 7. Chris Miller and Dean Flavel. Dean sitting quite high in the championship standings. Both of these drivers inside the top 10 will be looking forward to moving forwards. Jason Fewens will start off alongside of Glenn Corbett for 17th and 18th. Row number 10 is going to be Mark Poynton and Darren Crosby to round out the 20, Dave.
Yep, and then Robert Griffiths is the driver who's going to start out at 21st alongside Michael Stewart. Stephen Varga and Matty Parker are the next row behind there. I love that helmet for Matty Parker. Stuart Hall and David Kirby are 25th and 26th here. Only just 1 second away from that pole time. Super competitive and stacked and close back here with Jamie McKnight and Paul Burns 27th and 28th. Scott McCune and Gary Buckland are 29th and 30th on this grid. And 31st and 32nd, Shane Randall and Robert Crisdale. And then the other drivers with the qualifying times are Darren Goosey, Christian Smart, Craig Friend and Chris Blanchard. Last one is Jim Caparonis, also still with a qualifying time. So no drivers without a qualifying time, even with just 2 laps to set one. Circuit where the track limits can be a little bit touchy, or in Supercars land, I think the yellow curb graphic likes to come up sometimes.
Yeah, and this is, ladies and gentlemen, the drivers tonight on Zoom that we've been flicking throughout the journey. 1 bonus point for getting yourself involved in the Zooming call. It's not a lot, but 1 bonus point across 10 rounds is 10 bonus points. That could help your championship. We've got the Dyno, which is not necessarily his head cam, but does show us exactly what his heart's doing. Apparently, he's just a little bit excited as it currently stands. Glenn Corbett, Soggy Gamble on the top row in middle and left. We'll move down from left to right from there on. Christopher Blanchard on the second rows. Jason Fewens sits in the middle. Travis Hunt, nice and calm. Cool, the operator over there. David Kirby, Scott McCune and Chad Lewis on the third row of the webcams there. Damien Cairns, who was always listening along, Michael Stewart, and one final driver in the bottom right. Right, revs are starting to rise from our race grid. We are about to go green flag racing. 200 kilometers from Interlagos between lakes. Who is going to be sitting on the front end and enjoying themselves, and who is going to be sitting in between lakes of tears as they run down at turn number 1. Good start, though, from Matt van der Kranz, trying to go around the outside of Talianchich. Will get the inside at turn 2, and Tally's let him have it. So van der Kranz sits second, made up spots on the first couple corners, but Scott Gamble is already trying to set sail and run down and into the sunset, and it looks like we've just about got the way through deeper in the field. And the stewards, by the way, were just saying to the drivers, just be a little bit careful, because the last couple times this series has come here, it has been dramas and a long night at the office for race control. That sets the standard early, and I like they said that, Dave.
It was stacked 4 wide deeper in the field, but Scott Gamble doesn't need to worry about any of that as he leads the front of the field single file. Seems like that talking to did well. Most of them got cleanly through on the cold tyres off that race start through the center S's right at the start of the lap, but now things concertina up again into some of these slow corners.
Yeah, you got to find your rhythm early, and where are you going to sit? Who are you going to use up, and who are you going to work with as a drafting buddy as they run down in here deeper in the pack? You can still see it too wide, lots of locked brakes towards the rear end of the field. There's a lot of drivers struggling for grip on the front end, particularly on unloaded sides. I'll tell you what, it is going to be it's too wide down into the last realistic corner of the lap. It's not the last corner on the lap, of course, but that says that arguments are still being settled, arguments are still being sorted, but lap number 1 in the books, and Scott Gamble's going to lead another one, and that is very, very good for his championship hopes. He's already starting to do all the right things and tick all the right boxes. Who's going to get brave on the run to turn number 1? It's, like you said, Dave, premium overtaking spot.
Pretty clean all the way through the field on that opening lap as well. Your only driver who lost particularly many spots, Gary Buckland, but only back 5, so no one spun around to dead last in the field. Have waited till maybe now to get a little more elbows out, cleanly negotiating on that starting fuel, and then with an eye on what the strategy is going to work out across these 200 kilometres of Sao Paulo. Bit of a check-up back here.
Oh, they're really throwing elbows at each other deep in the field as they run down. I believe that was Christian Smart and Shane Randall that were going at each other quite aggressively. They're trying to swap to the middle of the road and look for the opening. Smarty's quite a lot deeper in the field than he necessarily would have liked, and he's trying to settle himself back in at the moment. And by the way, I had a look. the drivers that are inside the top 10, there are only 2 changes of position. So we saw Matt van der Kraan get by Michael Taliancic. The other one, Chad Lewis, managed to get by David Nash. So everyone is all the way back to, that's the only position swapped all the way back to 13th. And there's only another 2 positions swapped inside the top 15. So everyone minding their P's and Q's.
Yeah, Jason Fewens up 2 spots on the graphic a little bit further back. Jamie McKnight making a charge 27th on the grid, up to 22nd at the moment. And I guess the pit window opens now. Not sure I'd want to go for it just yet.
Well, I mean, if you need a little bit of free air and you got pace, you're probably looking to undercut just to get that free air. But there's so much tyre fall off around here, Dave, and that's the big key. You just leave yourself vulnerable should anything happen in the middle of the race,
isn't it?
Yeah. So in the meantime, most positions gained on that first lap is going to be Jamie McKnight from Craig Friend from Christian Smart. But you can see there's just not, normally by now somebody's jumped in 8 or 9 or so positions, but it's just not able to make the positions. So I think the big key was that what they were saying about overtaking potential, quite low, well, medium, I think it's bang on.
Yeah, that Brazilian barbecue, that's great. That medium rare, fantastic. Love the food. Love the action on track right now. Robert Crisdale's the only driver who's going to go early on the first pit stop.
And I wonder whether or not that might have been for just a touch of damage for Robert Crisdale. I mean, we've been seeing the big thing.
Started out at 30 seconds, so maybe just, you know, from the 30s on backwards, just thinking, let's do something different. The concertina effect in the middle and the tail of the field at Desida del Lago on lap 1 was insane.
I'm actually seeing no damage on that car. I went back and had
Kirby's around.
Pretty extensive look at it. Dave Kirby's going to go around somewhere in the middle of the pack, so he's got an issue and now he's trying to recover. That was out of 26, probably a little bit deeper in the field than he necessarily would have liked, and immediately have a look at the attitude on that car, but there's damage on it as well on the rear bumper, so I think someone's gotten into the back of him. He was already out of control though, so we're gonna replay of it. I'm sure.
Shake of the head tells you a lot. There was definitely a little bit of help. Oh, fair enough. Fair enough.
So thumbs down from Dave Kirby. He's listening along to it. So this will tell the story, and it's the run up and through the twisty and technical, and then he gets on the curb on the left-hand side there, goes around on his own, and then gets finished off. And something's happened in turn 1 as well for John Latham.
Yeah, so he's on too much curb. And he's like, I can save this. Nope, not like that. You can't, unfortunately.
It's good. Glenn Corbett off track as it currently says. I believe that's actually live pictures right now. So that was the replay. My apologies. So there was additional issues for Glenn Corbett, and then this is what happened to John Latham. So slides down the inside of Rob Crisdale at turn 1, but that then you got to look at how long he had to carry the brake for, and there's just a tiny nudge, but it's at an unloaded section of the track there, Dave.
Yeah, you're taking different lines through there. It's tough brake on that one. Other drivers looking for a switchback. Doesn't quite happen. And of course, then they get too ambitious with it, and that's what led to the contact right at the point that the other driver's looking to take their steering from a bit left hand down to right hand down into the second part of the center S's.
And this is Dave Kirby still trying to recover from the rear end of the field. I can tell you right now that John Latham has bounced off a bunch of extra walls and struggling to make corners, trying to make it back to pit lane. He is driving the walking wounded, and this is Robert Crisdale, who's already made his first stop at the end of lap number 2, so satisfying one of his first compulsory pit stops. That's going to hurt. And the other side of that coin is that for John Latham to come into pit lane right here, he may go a lap down very, very early on. That is tough to recover from.
Yeah, I mean, we're dealing with only just over a 90-second lap around here in these cars, so even quicker in, you know, F1 and things like that, where they're kind of approaching around about a minute.
Oh, that was almost a contact, and Nitschke gets into the side right there of, I think that was Brad Doble that he just nudged out of the way. And that's going to be looked at by the officials as well, but Nitschke's now had contact with 2 separate cars now, which is not, that's not a comment on his driving ability. That's just the facts as they currently stand. And sometimes you've got to settle yourself back down, and I don't think in either case he's missed it by much either. So something else is going on here. So this is Michael Whiting who's trying to get down the inside on the run down into turn 4. So that gives Nitschke a nudge, gets him out of sequence, gets him out of sync. And then he's just trying to regather himself back up, loses 4 spots to that one. And then it's down here, he just misses the braking marker, just trying to have another go back at Brad Doble. Tough to call from that one, Dave. That is a difficult situation to be in. So that's 3 pieces of contact now for Nitschke he's been involved in.
Yeah, and it's a double apex there heading up the hill as well. So you're like, did he come out a bit wide? And it's like, well, he kind of maybe followed a little closer to the natural racing line than you'd expect, based on sort of the shape of the line the drivers carry up there. But he wasn't alongside going into it. So then you're diving into what could be a closing gap in that situation.
I tell you what, Brad Doble's just been under assault the entire time since that incident. Now Jason Fewens and him are going to go side by side as they run up the hill into turn number 6. He's managed to come out the other side with it at the moment. If we can go back and have a little bit of a look at Brad Doble, he is struggling at this point in time because he is just getting boxed about the ears. Greg Sharp is the next car on the road ahead of him. And Jason Fewens in behind now, shadowing him like a hawk as well. So he's got to find a rhythm here. And now we've just had an update.
Yeah, I was hearing those penalties, that's why I was quiet.
Yeah, so I'll leave that one for you then, Dave.
Well, Brendan Nitschke has a drive-through penalty for contact on lap 4. I suspect the moment on lap 4 that we did have a look at were riding on board with. So that also throws another big spanner in the works of your pit lane strategy, because you can't serve a drive-through by not driving through. Removes the 1 lap from the options of when you could pit.
And the other problem is, I think he's going to wait. I think he's going to run this out in the last possible lap he's got available to him to serve it, because I think he needs that field spread.
Yeah, and there's looking at all of the traffic here, not very many easy places to slot back into either. You've only got 2 cars that have stopped at this point. And yeah, Rob Crisdale very, very early. John Latham, I think, because of the damage that he was carrying. Other than that, everyone else is thinking, no, difficult to pass, very easy to perhaps even fall off the lead lap, and very easy to just end up battling someone that's not your pace, not your battle for a couple of laps.
I think there's a really interesting note actually about the strategy that Rob Crisdale's gone on to, which is where he's gone for the very, very early pit stop. Now, he's still a second slower than the race leaders at this point in time, but for where he was in terms of the queue, you know, starting towards the back end of the pack, he is seconds faster than the drivers that are actually around him relative to on track. So although he's dived out of that train very, very early on, and it is going to be a very long race from here, effectively he's saying, I'm going to split the race down the middle and then chop 2 laps off it. So he's going to do, what, 22 and a 23 lap stint on those tyres?
Yeah, we had smoke and sparks coming out of our calculators earlier as well, trying to work out exactly what the pit delta looks like. But with 17 seconds of service of fuel going in for Crisdale, and then the pit delta, the pit loss from that's probably about 25 seconds. So he's cleared that much out of the way. And then you look that far up the road and you go, oh no, once everyone else takes their first stop, he might cycle back through into, you know, somewhere in the top 20. 35th, 36th is not really, of course, where he's running, having made that early stop.
And one of the bigger difficulties I don't like about this super undercut strategy that he's on at the moment, I think the big part about it is you've only got 2 or 3 laps on those tyres, so the tyre fall off is not a big thing. So he's definitely gone, okay, I've stuffed quali, I actually have pace to show and I couldn't show it, so this is the way I go about showing it.
Second place is pretty hot right now. Scott Gamble will be glad to see a bit of a battle in his mirrors as his lead extends significantly as we go. Talian's just got back in front of Matt Van der Kraan, and of course Blake Delaney there in 4th, as highlighted on the graphics, right in with a sniff of this as well.
Yeah, and have a look at Chad Lewis, by the way, who's in that next battle pack. So the next 3 cars on the road are sort of Michael Whiting, Travis Hunt, Chad Lewis. Chad Lewis is up 3 spots at the moment. David Nash is deeper inside the top 10. This has got an opportunity to good run for him. So we've got a few battle packs. I think you're right. And at the moment, it's just about finding your way into things. Tally's found a little bit of time. Now he's got to show that he's got those tyres He's looked after. And the bigger issue is Matt Vanderkrant actually just pinched a big break on the way down into turn number 1. He's offline at 2, and this is going to represent an opportunity for Blake Delaney now. Just up ahead of these guys. They've lost Tally just a little bit. They haven't lost the draft to Tally, but Delaney is now really crawling all over the rear bumper, and Vanderkrant says, I'm going to place this car extremely awkwardly for you. Does get down the inside. Delaney's in a little bit hot here. He'll run him out, look for the crisscross from Vanderkrant. Can't quite get the drive. Delaney gets that one done, and it's not done. It is not done on the run up the hill. Through the kink at 5. Now the crest at 6. Now Delaney will settle himself back in, and that's all from a pinch break at turn 1.
Yeah, very good from Delaney to get back on the line on the exit of Interlagos in 5 there, and then coming up the hill, also be able to defend the inside and just stake his claim to it after getting down the inside. There was no crisscross that was going to happen the way that Delaney parked it, and they're not going to let him easily down the inside or get to the inside of the next corner there. So Delaney up 2 spots from where he started, now up into that 3rd place. Hoping that a little bit of clean air in front, he could catch Taliancic. Hope that Taliancic is going to catch Scott Gamble, and that maybe they can not let the leader get away too comfortably in this first stint.
Really interesting to note at the moment, by the way. Scott Campbell's actually not the fastest car on track. He had a really slow last lap, so I think something happened there, whether he pinched a brake, ran wide somewhere. Not 100% sure. But the fastest 3 cars on track were Michael Whiting, Travis Hunt, and Chad Lewis. All 3 of them running in the 33.2-3 sort of marker, and all 3 of them running a reasonable time. Again, Gamble will now go quicker once again on this lap, so I would say there was definitely a mistake at that point in time, but yeah, everyone's sort of struggling a little bit for grip, and compared to our fastest lap times right now, Dave, for most of the drivers have fallen off 7 to 9 tenths of a second in 10 lap.
Yeah, I was just looking at that tyre drop off, basically the last lap for the drivers versus what their best lap in the race has been, and it is across the field, not quite at 1 second, but approaching that for a lot of drivers. Especially up by leaders here, all of them are 9 tenths of a second away from their best. Through the tail of the field, there's a few drivers that are a bit closer, because when the tyres were right at the peak, there was too much traffic, too much battling, and so now they're only sort of half a second away from their best because they didn't get the clean air right at the start of the stint when the tyres were freshest.
I think an interesting case, and you pointed him out on that opening lap, was the amount of positions made by Jamie McKnight, and I think we'll be keeping an eye on that one. I think he might have just gained one more off Matty Parker on the current lap. No, I think they crossed the line, the positions they were in, but he's got a phenomenal couple cars worth of battle packs just ahead of him. Michael Stewart, Darren Crosby and Stephen Kennedy are all going a little bit toe-to-toe at the moment for 16th spot. They're all sort of relatively close together. Just up the road of them, you've got another train of cars, which is Mark Poynton all the way through to David Nash. So that's 8th back to 15th. So there's a reasonable number of cars sort of battling there, and then it's just battle packs, little breakups, little box ins. And if you have a look in behind these guys, Dave's as well, there's another pack forming from McKnight back to 24th spot. So packs starting to form throughout the field.
Yep, it's still super dense around here. Know anything about the traffic in Sao Paulo? That's about right.
A lot of ability to draft around this place with just the longer straights as well. If you can just hang on in the middle sectors and then just save a little bit in the flat-out portions of this racetrack, there's a lot of drafting games that can be played at this track.
Accentuated by how much of an uphill run it is out of Junsao all the way up to the braking zone at turn 1 and crossing the start-finish line. So no longer the biggest mover, Jamie McKnight, because of the progress that Christian Smart's been able to make just a little bit further behind. It gets sort of progressively tougher to keep picking them off the higher up the order you get, and then the further the field ends up looking spread.
I think the big key is Jamie McKnight's also not getting any draft assist from the pack that's actually up ahead of him at the moment, whereas Christian Smart's just in the middle of all these cars that are trying to draft, trying to battle each other. So I think right now for him it is relatively easy. I'm not going to say easy pickings because that's the wrong, but it is easier pickings of what Jamie McKnight's dealing with. A run out of the final couple corners and onto the start-finish straight. And we focused in on David Nash for a few moments. He is going to be the driver that looks for a little bit of an undercut. We are at the conclusion of the 11th lap of racing. Michael Stewart's going to dive to the lane and look for a little bit of an advantage as well. And Travis Hunt's had an incident down at turn number 1, so now we've got to keep half an eye on that as well.
Run way deep through 1. Only just found enough runoff to not have to drive it all the way back into town, but be able to get it back on the racetrack, down the grass in towards turn 2. So quite a bit of time lost from that big run through the grass.
And we'll go back and have a replay and have a look at what was on that lap for Travis Hunt. Still stays inside the top 10 though, so, you know, look, one mistake. The critical thing is not letting it affect you. Do you then go in this car, Dave, you go, oh, I've pinched a lot of brake there, I've got to dive to the lane. So we'll have a look at the run wide first, then we'll discuss.
Yeah, so bit of space in front of him, bit of space behind, relatively clean air, but you can tell he's in too hot. It's rear locking there, and oh, yeah, I'd consider some new tyres after that. Consider a few clean changes, but it starts with getting in too hot here, and then once he goes to turn in, it's rear locking.
Wow, that's a save. That is actually an impressive save for him to not only keep that out of the barrier, but keep the car in a somewhat controllable state that he can keep retarding the speed of that machine as well. So, lucky to probably come away with an engine sort of hanging on to things. And now there is...
He's not going to be the only one to hit pit lane. It's going to get mighty busy right now.
So Damien Cairns, Travis Hunt, Jason Fewens and Brad Noble are all going to fire in out of that battle pack. And now we start to see a little bit of the strategy disparity as cars up and down the field are diving to the lane. Now we've got to keep an eye on where does Robert Crisdale pop out in all this. Well, Michael Stewart and David Nash have popped out just ahead of him, and remember, Crisdale was one of the early takers for that stop. Oh, and by the way, John Latham, he's only about 9 seconds back off Crisdale after all of that damage. So, yeah, look. So Crisdale was the driver, that did take the stop. Who am I thinking of that had the drive-through penalty? It was Nitschke that had the drive-through penalty to serve.
Yeah, and so a good chance of some variation of the fuel drop through different cars, different drivers here. You can see those pit stop times, 20 seconds, 24 seconds, 27 seconds. There is a world where you take just enough fuel to cover the tyres here and then get you to that critical lap, and then you have to take the big amount of fuel later on, or you try to cut it a little bit more evenly. And there's sort of two schools of thought to that as well, isn't there? Because if it stays green the whole length of the race, then taking a little less in the early stop gives you good track position, and then you pay it later, it's the same total cost, and you have better track position and less traffic throughout the race. But if you take a lot of fuel now and then we do sort of go safety car, something that gives you some of that time back, then you're looking at a shorter second stop maybe compared to some of the cars that you're directly wheel to wheel with. Lap 15, 16 is kind of where the cut it evenly into 3 segments pit stops would come, but there's a few drivers hitting the lane a little earlier than that. And again, just thinking, can I get a 1 or 2 lap undercut the way that the tyres have been dropping off? And everyone, as the fuel's burnt down, a little closer to still just 9/10, 1 second off.
You guys have got me back now, yeah?
Yep.
Okay, apologies about that. The Cats decided that now was the most appropriate time to knock all my monitors out.
Oh, I said really clever things while you were gone.
Yeah, I could hear you the whole time. I'm impressed, Dave. The only thing I'm annoyed about is that you haven't made enough puns yet.
That's a long race. I want everyone to be invested in the race before I scare them off. And that's somewhere after everyone's completed their first stop. Then you're really invested in how this 200 kilometers of Sao Paulo is going to play out as the leader hits the lane. He's my number 2 Scott.
I thought I was the number 2 Scott. He's got number 1 on the car up there. Right, so yes, Gamble's now going to hit the lane. Doesn't want to get undercut by the cars behind him. The typical strategy for Taliandrich has been to run this first stint as long as he physically can. So we'll see if that one continues through to fruition. How about Robert Crisdale? Remember, I think worth noting that he started all the way back in 34th and came to the lane for a very, very early stop, or for him, sits 29th. So that is definitely where we finally got the answer to that question there, Dave, and it has worked out for him the way that he wanted.
Yeah, except the other way to look at it, though, is he's there having taken 17 seconds of the total amount of fuel he's going to need to take. And he is behind some drivers who've taken 20 seconds, 25 seconds of fuel on board, potentially. So, while he'll have some reasonable track position after all of this, he will still be headed for a longer final stop than a few of those cars. But, you know, if you're quick enough, or you've got, you know, half a second per lap in pace, that's the kind of pace advantage where it's tough to cleanly and consistently make passes through the traffic lap after lap. But if you find a little bit of clean air, and you just keep working that, then you can make a slightly odd strategy work, so long as you keep your nose clean and keep being able to show your pace advantage to try to work back up to the position that your pace represents.
Yeah, interesting to note as well, we're coming up on 1/3 race distance, so at the end of this lap we will be right on that marker. So for Taliancic, he's going to dive into the lane, 1/3 race distance. That's about as far as he could go in terms of the fuel. Blake Delaney has come in with him, so I would say this is actually maximum distance they could have gone on that first fuel tank. Now the difficulty is, how much do you fill it up? Do you throw another third of a tank at the fuel? I think with the tyre fall off, you've just got to give yourself a more agile car here, Dave. It does. The thing about the supercar is that in a fixed setup scenario, it does change the balance of the car, and that's quite key.
Yeah, so you've got another run on pit lane for everyone except Chris Miller, who's still staying out. The bulk of the rest of the field, you can see hitting pit entry there. Scott Gamble sees them, opens up the road in front of him, and he'll go back up to second place pending Chris Miller's pit stop.
Who is going to fire out of pit lane first? It is Taliancic. Does dive out of the lane, but I think he might have taken a little bit of a longer stop. That stop for Gamble, normally he takes quite a lot of fuel at his stops. I think he's actually underfueled relative to Taliancic, because he's pulled quite a reasonable margin here at this point in time. Now, Mark Poynton has made his way through to fourth.
Strategy on Poynton.
So is he just taken like a splash of fuel and we'll see him back in the lane in the near future?
Yeah, well, it's 18 seconds from my numbers here, so might have just been in a sort of, you know, 10th, 11th, 12th position, and then gone 5 seconds less of fuel, and through that jumped a whole bunch of cars up to what we expect to be sort of net third. Now, Poynton does need to be quick in this stint if he's going to hold on to that after the second round of stops, but hey, look at that clean air for Poynton, who'd already made some spots in the first stint and then jumped a whole bunch more in the stops.
Well, I can tell you, I just went back and had a little bit of a look. When he pit, he was out of about 10th-ish, 8th, 9th, 10th, somewhere right around there. So he's in that nice little battle pack as Delaney and Vanderkran are going to continue this battle out on track. And now Blake Delaney will make his way on through. Travis Hunt is now going to be the driver that's going to be trying to close up on Matt Vanderkran. But he's going to get a big old run down the start-finish straight. And both Delaney and Vanderkran pit on the same laps, the same age on the tyres. There is none of that extra sheen advantage for Matt Vanderkran. Does he get the elbows out? Well, he's forced Blake Delaney to cover him to the inside, so he's going to be going the long way round. Delaney's a little bit deeper in on the brakes, but does this represent an opportunity? Well, Travis Hunt closed right up in on the braking as well, so I think Vanderkran might have just been saving a fraction, not trying to really use up the tyre here, and that may pay dividends a lot later on.
Some of the other drivers to watch, Blake Delaney took 32 seconds of service. If it's 32 seconds of fuel, he's got that thing loaded to run a long stint here if necessary, or take a short fill when the critical nap number, I think I could do with one, critical lap number is reached. And then you've got Michael Whiting back in 8th with a 33-second stop. Now, if that's not a problem, and that's genuinely just the fuel hose was connected for that long for topping him up, you've got a really wide strategy window and a short stop to the tail end of this race, and you look okay now leading this train, but you could look like a hero later.
Yeah, there's going to be a significant margin over a couple of drivers ahead. It's going to be 11 seconds to Brad Doble in terms of difference in fuel, and Brad Doble's only about 3.5 seconds up the road, so clear him comfortably. Travis Hunt is half a second up the road from there, and again, another 10 seconds in terms of the margin as well, so... And then, how about that? About 15 seconds less for Mark Poynton. So that is a very, very light fuel load for Mark Poynton in terms of things. That is a significantly lightened fuel load. But again, he's making hay, Dave. So, I mean, screw it. You got to love the guy for having a crack. We always love somebody who's willing to risk it a little bit.
Yeah, I think it is a slightly more risky strategy, but the people taking risks, when they fail, you laugh at them, but when it doesn't, and the right cards, flip on the poker table, and suddenly you look like a genius. And people who look like geniuses are the ones who take a little bit of a risk and occasionally fail, and then when they don't, happy days.
Well, Matt Payne from Townsville last weekend went for the 3-stop. How many of the drivers in the field went for the 3-stop? Chaz Mostert was one of them. Didn't work for him. Now, there was an issue in the pit lane, albeit, there was an issue with tyre dramas yet again for Chaz, and he'll complain and whinge and whine, which is fair enough given the amount of issues he's had this year. But yeah, look, sometimes you've got to be a little bit aggressive in terms of tyre strategy. Are you looking forward to Gen 3 supercars, Dave?
Am I contractually obliged to say yes?
You can say.
Oh no, I am. I'm interested to see, not just how the Australian supercars fans will react to them, but if they'll maybe be a little internationally popular in iRacing. I'm interested to see, how and when iRacing get them, what data they use for them, and how faithful the many supercars drivers that are on iRacing say that the new generation would be.
Well, I can tell you, I'm pretty sure it was Anton De Pasquale's car that actually got scanned. So I do know both of the cars that got scanned. I'd have to dig through my notes and just double confirm, but I do know both of the cars that got scanned for the iRacing. And again, we're all going to sit here, we're all going to...
When you look at the interior of this ZF Commodore, it's all of 888 stuff.
Yeah.
So that's the giveaway.
It's not a 888 car. I know the Camaro is definitely not a 888 car, so... But anyway... The time to check in with the Dino Dino. Apparently very chilled out and relaxed. His stress level's very low tonight. He's having a good old-fashioned slug. He sits in 17th at the moment. Not necessarily on the right end of the table at the moment. And the other problem is, if you have a look at the cars that he's in this battle pack with, they've all got a lot more fuel on board than him, barring Brenton Nitschke's the only one. So he's going to fall probably a couple spots in terms of relative strategy to a few drivers in and around him at this point in time. But in and amongst it, and having a crack on the fuel strategy, and how good is it, Dave, when you sit down as well? What I like about the supercar, and what I think is working well with the current pit stop regulations, is no one's on the same strategy. Everyone's slightly different.
So, Dino's dyno, right? Well, was he up to 700 calories?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. 1,200 in a regular Zinger box. So we're working there. I reckon by lap 47 we'll be there. That's my pit stop strategy.
Okay, well, I mean, that's good, because now I know what it takes for me to be able to get a KFC feed in terms of racing capacity. Now, that does include his practice time, obviously, and qualifying and everything else all tagged in. But
and it includes the, I don't know the correct words for this, and I haven't... it includes the ambient, not just the extra additional exertion on top of just regularly sitting in that number. But it's good to just check, see if that goes up, if he's in a bit more of a battle later on.
Have a look at Mark Poynton here, because Mark Poynton's made his way past Matt van der Kraan. And with that
the other way?
Sorry, my apologies. Yep, Blake Delaney has reeled in and overtaken Mark Poynton. My apologies. So, this was one lap ago as they ran uphill, and Mark Poynton will now have somebody to draft off, which maybe, and you can just see Blake Delaney just says, yep, I've got the pace, I've got the tyre, and Poynton doesn't hold him up either, which is the big key. He goes, yep, okay, that move was going to happen eventually. Let's not cost myself some time squabbling for it.
That's put Blake Delaney in a position that I really like, because now, okay, yeah, good pace, moving up in a third and potentially carrying more fuel than some of the others around as well.
And issues for Glenn Corbett in the current lap deeper in the field, and Shane Randell might have had an incident. They were neck and neck for 28-29th on track when they met. This is the run down through turn 4, and Rendell runs a touch wide, and then Corbett just trips him up as they get through here. But Corbett is trying to redress. He stops immediately. Gary Buckle in the car that does manage to make his way on through.
So you're right in behind the other driver. He gets a little bit on the AstroTurf. You're looking for the inside. Then you're like, oh, the inside's going to close. I'm looking for the outside. Oh, that's his rear bumper.
But the good news is that at least he redressed it immediately, sat there and waited, and then that's what sportsmanship's about.
Yeah, not only was it initially not malicious, I don't think it was even that clumsy initially either. Sometimes you go like, oh, there was no malicious in that, but like, you're clumsy and you've misjudged that horribly. I don't think there was a whole lot of anything in that other than just
racing.
Wrong time. If it was in a straight line and you made contact like that with the bumper of the car in front, I think you'd be able to play on, but just because of how the shape of that corner is there.
Yeah, loaded, very tight, very tricky, and if you don't make the apex on there, the corner, all of a sudden you run out of room very, very quickly, whereas, you know, Corbett did actually make the apex, and Shane Randell didn't. You know, that'll be factored in by the stewards. I'll have a look at it. Dave Kirby's recovery drive, though, in the meantime, has gotten his way up into 32nd, out of starting at a 26th, and now he's in an intense fight with John Latham and Paul Burns. Albeit John Latham pit all the way back at the end of lap number 4 and is on ailing tyres at the moment, so Kirby's really trying to hold him off, and Latham looks pacey though. He for older rubber, he's doing reasonably well.
Yes, 7 lap old tyres on David Kirby, 16 lap old tyres John Latham, and can keep Latham behind and get past Paul Burns. We might even get a thumbs up today out of David Kirby. Good chance, because Burns, I think, lit it up on the curb out of Junsao there.
Yeah, I wonder how much he's listening on board at the moment. You can just see a little bit of a breath, a little bit of a calming presence. And I tell you what, John Latham's starting to get a little bit of a run in behind him as well. I think Latham's going to swing it to the inside and have a crack. John Latham is going to swing to the inside and have a crack down in under brakes on the run into turn number 1. Paul Burns just ahead, checks him up a little bit, but Latham gets to the inside as one. Does Kirby give him the space? No, he's going to stay up and alongside. So the run down through turn 2. Now Kirby gets checked on the higher side and he cannot hang it around there. And John Latham, on 9-lap older tyres, manages to find his way back through, draft assisted down through turn 1, had to be late on the brakes, but job done for John Latham. And for someone who's on an alternate strategy, who had damage, that is an impressive overtake to hang on to that much of a tyre deficit.
Yeah, so now he probably reckons that he's going to be next to line up Paul Burns, now that taking that opportunity away from David Kirby. John Latham in the middle of this, and very quickly within a couple of corners getting close to Paul Burns here.
And Race Control just went through and added a post-race points penalty to Glenn Corbett, basically saying, yep, we noted that you redressed the incident as well. It's not worthy of a drive-through, just due to the redress as well. So noted by the stewards and action upon, still enough in it to say, hey, that it needs to be some sort of penalty here to say, yes, we definitely did something about it, but the redress did help.
That point, and still sniffing around behind Blake Delaney here. The point that I wanted to make was, I was talking about this fuel advantage that Blake Delaney has got, the good strategy position it puts him in. So he took perhaps 7 seconds more fuel than Scott Gamble, race leader, but he's gone from being about 9 seconds behind the race lead to 13 seconds behind the race lead over the last handful of laps. It's been slow and steady, but it's not like he's sticking just 5 seconds behind Scott Gamble with 7 seconds more fuel on board and definitely going to jump him for the race lead in the final stint. It's sort of not quite got the pace of Scott Gamble or Michael Talyancic leading, and I guess that's kind of evidenced by how many ducklings he's got in the train at the moment.
Yeah, and by the way, we're about 9 laps away from getting to the 2/3 distance mark and seeing the final pit stop start to come in. So I'd say that window, Dave, what do you reckon, from about 4 laps from now? We might start to see it. 5 laps early is quite a hefty undercut, and there's quite a distance to go, but there'll be some drivers who'll do that too.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing this balancing act with when you stop sort of your tyre age versus your track position versus your undercut, and you can't have all of them, because if you're going to get an undercut, you're going to give up some track position, and then you're giving up some tyre life towards the tail end of the stint.
This battle's continuing on, so Chad Lewis just made a move around the outside at turn number 1 on David Nash. Now Nash is on 4-lap older tyres, so ailing a little bit, and 3 seconds worth of extra fuel on board for Chad Lewis. So he is in a strategy advantage at the meantime, and there's a couple cars ahead of him that he will eclipse in the pit stop. But right now, for Chad Lewis driving supremely well, the problem David Nash has now got is Darren Crosby and Damien Cairns are going to start to line him up, and he has got more fuel on board than both of those drivers, which is going to create a little bit of an issue for him in the next couple laps. But clean and concise from Chad Lewis gets the job done.
Where's Stills and Young? They'll get it.
I don't. You've completely gone over.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Someone will know what I'm talking about. David Nash battling Darren Crosby.
And now run down through the middle of the lap on board with Damien Cairns as well, and you can see he just has to take a little bit of a breath. Tips in. Look at how little wheel he's trying to use at the moment. You know, grab assist sequential, downshifts. You've got to really use that engine braking to pull this car up.
It's also a sort of a balancing the weight transfer through a long braking zone as well. As when you first slam on the brakes, you've got a lot of weight transfer at the high speed to the front axle, and then as you get deeper in the braking zone, you kind of want a little more engine braking deep in the corner. Or maybe you encounter a little bit of the opposite, but you don't have, you know, dynamic brake bias migration in these cars unless they've snuck that in when I wasn't paying attention. But you can sort of manually do a little bit of that. You're like, yeah, when I first brake in the straight line here, a lot on the front axle is good, but then as we start to turn in, I need to want a little more on the rear axle and how you do your downshifts, when you do your downshifts, whether you take a lot of engine braking early or late. If you're really maximizing it, you can do a bit of that.
I think the big key in why Van Gisbergen was quite strong on these cars as well, he adds a little bit of clutch in it. And they talked a lot about it in NASCAR when he first went over there and won Chicago last year, of the heel and toe. And
no one else knew how to downshift but him.
Yeah, well, that was the big key, right? Everyone was talking about wheel hop in the rear end because the tyres, it was just getting overloaded. Well, Van Gisbergen was managing the wheel hop with the clutch. It wasn't necessarily the downshift and the blipping. It was managing the hop by managing the amount of torque, negative torque being applied through the rear axle.
It's getting a bit feisty in the Delaney train. So Poynton's still sitting there in fourth. Van der Kraan, Travis Hunt, Brad Doble, a few of them looking a little pacey. And the driver other than Poynton in this group with the least fuel on board is Brad Doble. So he is one of the drivers you imagine would really like to make some progress if possible. Either that or he's saving fuel like a wizard to try to match a final stop that isn't going to need to be longer than those around.
Travis Hunt just gets all out of shape and right over and uses a lot of the curb work as well, and a little bit of breathing room back to Brad Doble. But yeah, I think that's an important point. But this is Brad Doble's best run thus far in Split 1. Stepped up to Split 1 this season and has given himself every opportunity to be at the pointy end. And, you know, he's been learning, he's been progressing, and Interlagos is working. You know, sometimes, Dave, as well, in terms of psychology for a driver, one good run like this, even though the skill set, you might be coming into a couple of worse tracks, sometimes it can just trigger a little bit more pace at those tracks. Confidence becomes a big thing.
Definitely one of those moments right there where he's thinking, where is my nose relative to this car in front? As he got super close. Don't want to get too close. Don't want to be checked up through the middle here where you can't pass. You're looking for a run out of the left-hander here.
He did drive it into the apex very, very nicely, did Travis Hunt. And the difficulty now, I mean, the other thing is 6 seconds worth of extra fuel. That's going to equate around somewhere between about 13 and 15 litres in the tanks. Difference between Matt van der Kraan ahead, who'll have more on board, and Travis Hunt, who'll have less on board. So straight line speed will be affected by that amount as well. None of them appear to be saving all that much. They're all sort of driving quite aggressively. And now Travis Hunt's actually had a really good run through turn 2, which has set himself up nicely. Last lap was way out and over the curbs. This time it'll be Matt van der Kraan who runs right out and over the curbs. Opportunity starting to present. I think Travis Hunt will show the nose. This isn't an actual dive, but it's just saying to Matt, I'm here, I'm coming, and I think I've got pace. I think I can get Mark Poynton on the road and start to go after Blake Delaney.
Yeah, just really trying to manage those exits off the corners as well. And if there's one time that Van der Kraan just doesn't quite hook it up, then it's an opportunity.
Up right now, you called it. David Haynes sets him up. Now he's going to get to the inside when they crest the hill. Up through 6, 7. This is 8. Then they'll get back to the left-hander at the bottom. The off-camber at 9. Job not quite done at Pinheiro. and now he gets the job done on the run up the hill to 10, and that took a fair while, and now a pinch of the brakes for Vanderkran as well. Makes him vulnerable to Doble, and Vanderkran was sitting in a nice little spot. That's going to shake some confidence out of the driver of the 180.
Again, just took a couple of corners to sort it all out, and now you're on this back foot again, and you're thinking another mistake. Brad Doble will be the next driver to have a look at me.
Tricky, tricky, tricky. Trying to set yourself up for the long run. Trying to get yourself in contention to put yourself in a reasonable position. Mark Poynton has run the longest that he can go on that stint. He's going to dive to the lane. There is 20 laps left to run, so it's going to be a very long final stint for Mark Poynton, but now he gets the opportunity to start a little bit of the undercut and see if he can make up some of that track position he's lost. It's going to be a longer stop through this period as well. Everyone will shuffle one spot further forward. The next car we're sort of looking at to pit's probably Brad Doble, which will probably be 2 laps away, I think is probably the furthest he can go.
Yeah, and Rob Crisdale just stopped after doing 24 laps, having pitted so early the first time. He's done 24 laps to get to his second stop. So drivers who are going to stop now and go to the end, they're going to run less laps on those tyres than Crisdale just did in his middle stint.
Yeah, and now the critical factor for him is 21 laps at the end. So he has run very, very long in that middle stint. He did get that car back up to full. And now the run to home won't be on an empty tank. Have a look at Chad Lewis, who's being a bit of a smooth operator in 10th spot at the moment. And he's got 8 seconds worth of fuel advantage to Michael Stewart on the road ahead. He's 2 seconds deficit to Whiting, who's the next car up ahead. And then 9 seconds to Brad Doble. So he will just come out ahead of Brad Doble if everyone was to pit and undercuts weren't to be counted in factor, which puts him about 7th spot in terms of the running at the moment, which is a very, very good night at the office, albeit he's on the back foot in terms of strategy right now.
Someone side by side a bit further back behind him. I think it might have been Fewens going around the outside of Nitschke. I think it was.
That's a difficult prospect to go around the outside of anyone here barring the first turn.
Yeah. So Fewens up another
Here we go.
there.
They're all starting to dive to the lanes, and who's it going to be? It's going to be Darren Crosby, Damien Cairns, and Greg Sharp all into the lane, and Sharp was deep. Sharp actually made up a lot of time on the pit lane entry, and that is all going to be relative time as well, because I think he braked at the last possible moment, so a really, really good pit lane entry from him. The tricky part now is, if you're Blake Delaney, do you come for the undercut? He's known for running quite short in the middle stint at least a couple times last season. This is Jason Fewens having a go at Crisdale.
Yeah, so I'm going to guess he wants to get to the inside at Pico de Pato here, and then it has to be round the outside going down the hill. So it's a bit of a check-up. Nitschke runs deep around the outside there. Fewens at the inside. Pico de Pato, and then the downhill, the descent. Oh, it gets close, and that's what initially drew my attention. And then Fewens just sails around the outside.
That's a tricky move to pull off, but he's pulled it off well. And then it's the run out of the final corner, and everyone starts to sort themselves back out again. I can tell you, Travis Hunt just lit the rears up as well on this current lap. So he is now starting to struggle. So Cairns are going to pop back out and get aggressive in terms of that strategy. We're all going to have a little bit of a crack at things, and Greg Sharp did actually make a lot of ground on pit lane, and a shorter stop has popped him back out ahead, so he has made advantage of the strategy. Mark Poynton is actually ahead of both of these guys as well, worthwhile to note. That will probably be another top 10 finish for Mark Poynton. And Poynton's actually fighting with one of the last cars without, it's Jim Caperonis that he's trying to make his way on by, and Caperonis pit at the end of lap number 15, so he's on a 14 lap run on this rubber, so fresh tyres versus old tyres is getting checked up just a little bit, lost a touch of time through the middle of the lap. Now he's going to get aggressive on the run to the flag. Caperonis might just peel off and might just let him go a little bit if he's aware of the strategy. No, they're both going to continue on in terms of racing, which means this has got to be done out on track. And now Mark Poynton flips it back to the inside. The run into turn number 1. Does he get deep on the anchors down here at 1? Caperonis has done a really good job, but yields eventually. And they sort that one out before they get to the apex.
Yeah, significant difference in the grip levels there, but still longer than you want that to take when you're Mark Poynton potentially battling for a podium. Every, couple tenths, half a second, half a lap stuck behind can definitely be a penalty. Either you're losing time compared to your rivals, or you're wasting your prime laps on that possible undercut.
And that battle pack, by the way, between Blake Delaney, Travis Hunt, Matt Vanderkram, Brad Doble, and it had Mark Poynton in it, has now split up a little bit. Blake Delaney's starting to find a little bit of time out at the head of that pack. Every one of the leaders continues on for another lap. I think we're going to see a few. Doble's now going to dive to lane, so he has gone a couple extra laps, gets to the end of lap 31. So he gets to the end of lap 30, I think becomes 31 as he enters the lane. So he's going to have a short splash and dash to the end, which will be a reasonable final stint. And indeed, pit lane becomes busy this time by Doble's in, Fewens is in, Nitschke in, Flavel all in. There's a fifth driver who's just pitted to the back end, which is a Pecky's performance car as well. Stephen Vargas made his way into the lane. So the bulk of the field, end of lap 30, they all decide to come to the lane here, Dave. Now it's a short sprint to the end.
Yeah, and I think we're really getting to the point where we're going to see some sort of tyre difference, those who stopped early, those who stopped late, because of course we didn't really get that in the early bit of the race. But then you think about drivers like Poynton who've just stopped versus how deep into this race someone like Blake Delaney can go, and what the difference in their grip's going to be in the back half of this race, in the final sort of 5 laps racing to the checkered flag.
Lap times at the moment as well for those drivers that just fallen off just over a second in terms of compared to their peak lap time as well. So Poynton and Doble come out just about even on the track. So all of that aggression from Mark Poynton has certainly paid out and going fuel shy in the middle stint. And I think these guys are still the leaders of all the drivers to have taken their second stop. So
until Scott Gamble finishes his, he's in the lane right now.
Oh, okay. Well, that'll change things as Gamble is going to dive to lane. Delaney's continued on, so Gamble doesn't want to be undercut. Taliancic is going, I'm hoping a little bit on a safety car. I think there might be one that comes my way. And then this will sort of tell us relative where everyone's going to shuffle out as well.
Yeah, still expecting Michael Whiting, Blake Delaney to potentially go long. They could have quite a couple more laps to run in this one, maybe looking to pit sort of with 10, 12 to go, something like that. Taliancic will be shortly, because he was only a lap or so separated from Gamble first time through.
I think Taliancic and Blake Delaney are both sitting there and going, oh, there's somebody who's just had an incident in the pit lane. I think it's Chad Lewis. Chad Lewis facing the wrong way. He was having a brilliant night at the office. What's caused this for Chad Lewis? That's a lot of damage to the front end.
Do we have a ranking for pit lane difficulty? It's not an easy one. Oh.
Well, we're going to have a look a little bit further back. It bounces over the curb, and then he's just trying to apply the throttle, and it just keeps going on him.
Now, you can have that same accident a bit further around and completely block the lane, but it's a bit wider there.
Oh, my word. But he was having he was inside the top 10. He was deep inside the top 10 for Chad Lewis, and now he's much, much further back. He's given up, I reckon, probably 5-6 spots at least in terms of relative race performance. Matt Vanderkran has also been through the lane. He's now popped back out. By the way, Travis Hunt's actually eclipsed him through the pit lane. So Travis Hunt now sits in a reasonably good spot in 11th. Jamie McKnight, Stuart Hall, Darren Goosey. I think a few of those are going to continue on. Drivers to come to the lane now. Blake Delaney's in. Whiting, Miller and Stephen Kennedy all dive into the lane.
Really short second stop from Delaney based on that long first stop that he had. So he's already out of there.
Yeah, he's only about just a tick under 5 seconds behind. I think he's right about 5 seconds to Scott Gamble as he exits this lane here. So that'll be relative to the race. I think he's going to be in contention to challenge Tally at the back end of this race. Particularly Tally. I think Tally's got to pit this time by. I think he's got to come to the lane this time by.
Yeah, I reckon you're going to see Taliancic feed out behind Delaney, but then again have that sort of 1 or 2 better tyre life age.
Someone just had an issue, so we're just hearing someone's just had a big old issue somewhere through the middle of the lap. I'm not 100% sure who it is. So Buckland's in, Caparonis is in, final stop done. Glenn Corbett and Craig Friend now to the lane for their final stops. And that's going to leave us with a couple of drivers left, and Michael Taliancic, David Nash chief among them. And Tally's just gone through for another lap, so he will not pit this time by.
Busy through the middle of the field, though, with the number of drivers we've talked about having made their second stop, a handful that haven't, some drivers that have had sort of the longer second stops, feeding back in amongst some drivers that had shorter second stops, and brings it all back together after that final pit stop. And everyone, by the end of that second stop, has to have taken about the same amount of fuel total across both stops, bringing the whole field back together after a bit of spread after the first stops.
Yeah, it's interesting to note everyone's sort of on it, and Chris Miller's made a fair bit of ground through the pit lane cycle as well, and Doble managed on that lap as well to find his way past Mark Poynton, and now he's starting to skip clear a little bit, and Matt Vanderkrans will be his next target that he'll be setting his sights on, but Poynton was inside the top 10, albeit no longer, and this will present an opportunity as well. Chris Miller's got 5 lap fresher tyres than Poynton, and it's only 2 laps compared to Brad Doble ahead, but that is still an advantage at this late juncture. Tally, I think, has gone on for another lap. So Michael Taliancic, no, he is into the lane. I just heard the alarm of the pit lane entry going off, and Chad Lewis still trying to hang on to that damaged race car up into 14th, but it would have been, I reckon, probably a 5th or a 6th if he hadn't have spun that thing, which is disappointing. I mean, we've all been there, Dave. We've all absolutely been there, and this car is difficult to drive on the bestie days, but to have it happen in the pit lane, you feel like a bit of a goose.
That's that elevation change, isn't it? And what you're seeing writ large is exactly how much damage Chad Lewis is carrying, how much it's disturbed Robbie Griffiths. I think it's about a second a lap of damage, honestly, for Chad Lewis there, which is making him difficult to pass, but he definitely is hurt a little bit with all of that damage on the front.
I just heard there was an incident on lap 32 for car 13, which is Glenn Corbett. Oh no, Tally's done something in the pit lane. Michael Taliancic has, I reckon, got either an unsafe pit lane entry
Black flag.
Speeding on entry.
It'll be speeding on pit lane. Glenn Corbett's had the same issue on the pit exit. Taliancic, he was on for second, he was on for third. He could have even been on for the win.
That sucks you in sometimes, getting into the pit lane as the hump on the entry. Yeah, he sped. He absolutely sped, did Michael Taliancic. We're going to get a replay that'll tell us the story. But he's thrown away, you know, an interesting fight to the end of this race. Second, third, whatever it was going to be. Speed limit's 80 k's an hour on the way in, and he was over 100 when he crossed the line. There is no getting... Look, they might let you away with 5 k's. They won't let you away with 20.
And they'll only let you away with 5 if you slow down to 75 k's an hour for a little bit, so that your average over the pit entry is below the speed limit, but you can't give up that much. But again, another driver caught out with that curbing in the pit exit, and at a big sharp drop off. And
now he's struggling with a lot of damage, and there was an incident that he's received a penalty for on lap 32 as well. So difficult night for a number of drivers. Now the benefit for Tally is he's got fresh rubber underneath him, and he'll have pace relative to a few cars, so he might be able to, there's enough time on the board to have a crack at trying to get back into the top 20, and the cars that he's trying to chase down are all in a little bit of a train and squabbling just up ahead of him, so it's still going to keep going on. So from 16th back to about 22nd, and then there's a tiny little break, 23rd and 24th are together, so a few cars on the road, just not too far away for him. Will give him an opportunity to keep himself relevant, and Chad Lewis is still ahead of him as well, and losing time every lap.
So Taliancic and David Nash were the last drivers to stop. Now, absolutely everybody has made 2 stops, and looks like in this final 12 laps, you're racing it out to the end, seeing who's got to manage a fuel a little bit, who's got tyres under them that they can just push on and no fuel dramas.
Yeah, and who's potentially underfilled that car a little bit as well, just to try and get a little bit of track position and hope they had a drafting buddy to hang on to it as well. Mike Poynton back up inside the top 10, sits 8th on track as it currently stands, so an opportunity for him to still score a boatload of points. He's plus 11 as it stands, and that's another great drive from him. Another driver of note, though, is Michael Stewart. Now, Stewart has got a little bit fresher rubber underneath him. He sits 11th at the moment, but he's got fresh rubber relative to the cars around him.
Yeah, to all except David Nash, then behind him, and we talked about stops late. has those better tyres, but needs to catch up a little bit more to get to this train. Stewart's staring straight at a couple of cars that is 2-3 laps fresher on tyres then.
And that's checking with the current point standings minus drop rounds, I believe, at this point in time. Means that Gamble will extend that margin at the top end, and Blake Delaney and Michael Whiting will lose a little bit of ground between each other. They sit second and third in the championship. They sit second and third on the road, so a little bit of that widening, that margining. But Michael Stewart maintains fourth spot at the moment, and we recognise he's not inside the top 10 at the moment, but could be before races end. Chris Miller's having a reasonable, okay night. Dean Flavell, not the best night that he's had, but Tally Andrews drops a bunch of spots. Now, Tally will pick up some more points and drive back up. But Brett Doble, great run to this point in time as a new fastest lap of the race, tells me that Michael Tally Andrews does indeed have speed.
Still not quite able to stick as close as you might have thought. Damien Cairns, Greg Sharp, Mark Poynton up there. David Nash might close in somewhat. The third fastest car that I can see inside of the top 15 or so there. So there's David Nash. Quicker than, say, Travis Hunt or Matt Vanderkrant on the last lap, who are 4th and 5th.
Yeah, but strategy position for those drivers put themselves in with a red-hot shout. And Vanderkrant as well. These drivers are lockstep in terms of their strategy at the moment. So they are identical on their tyre life. And this run down to the flag is going to be interesting. Because if Matt Vanderkrant can make some space, this will be a good run, a good return, a little bit to form for Travis Hunt's not had, the easiest races of late, has struggled to finish inside the top 10. So this will be a really, really good night at the office. Again, confidence building. As we keep an eye on for next week as well, which is Daytona, is where we head next week. Before it'll be Monza for round number 6. Imola the week after. Imola always creates good racing. An endurance round at Spa with 300 kilometres. Road Atlanta and Sandown will be finishing up the season with a 250 kilometre retro round. Retro round and supercars is always good to see, Dave. I know you're big into retro rounds and retro liveries.
Yeah, fits very well with these old outdated cars. I mean, this old outdated style of racing. I mean, this very historic type of racing that's dripping in heritage.
Yeah, I mean, you can throw it back. They're touring cars, and even though there's no Nissan in the field anymore, you can still throw a Godzilla livery at a car and go, hey, look, it looks cool. It reminds us of all something that these guys grew up in. And a big part of the veterans as well, you've got to be over 40 to be in this field. So they've all been around for a lot of touring car racing, and a lot of the cars that they looked at when they were growing up are quite relevant and quite important to them.
I reckon my pick, like a 2003 Kmart Racing.
They are popular. They are lovely.
That's sort of my level of about when I was old enough to be like, hey, Bathurst is this weekend and I know how to press channel 10 on the television. Age, like 7.
You know what cars I do enjoy, and it's taken me a long time to say this, is actually the Perkins Racing Engineering Ingle and Perkins cars for just pre 2000. I hated Russell Ingle. Was on my naughty list every year. I hated him. Couldn't stand the side of the gun. As I've grown older, I've grown to appreciate what he did for the sport. This battle pack is starting to spice up, though. And I think that's what we're looking at. Jason Fewens is starting to show.
David Nash is joining this, and his tyres 4 laps old compared to Poynton leading the group on 11-lap old tyres. So, and then some of the other groups like back here with Dean Flavel as well, where you've got drivers to the tail end like Taljancic, obviously, who we know could make a bit of progress. Why did I just jinx David Nash?
Well, David Nash isn't actually in this pack. He's a little bit further up the road. But yeah, I think Tally is a big point. And Tally's got really, really fresh rubber underneath him. And they're all nose to tail now. And the Dino Dyno, I think this is going to tell a little bit of the stories. The heart rate's come up about 100. So that means the relaxation level. And the calories, by the way, we haven't quite got to a Zinger Burger Box. And we're running out of time to get there, Dave.
Look, we can do a combo meal with the chips and drink, but 3 wicked wings and a potato and gravy isn't in the picture yet, but I think we're working towards it.
We just might have to hold on the free mini bun. That might be just how we get out away with this one.
Yeah, no dinner roll yet.
I think it's going to be a dive as we get down to turn number 1. We'll have to keep an eye in the background because here comes to the inside. Not quite up far enough. Is he going to get there? There's a little bit of banging of doors between Jason Fewens and Brett Nitschke. There's a secondary banging of doors at turn 2. And now that's going to allow Stephen Kennedy to go around the outside. Doesn't quite get the drive that he'd looked for. He's left enough room as Brett Nitschke. They're going to draw level as they pull along the straight. Touch of slide drafting. And now there's Jamie Knight firing down the inside. 3 wide. Yeah, he's going to show the nose. Not quite going to pull up alongside. Nitschke will hang on to the spot. Kennedy loses the rear end of the car early zone. They're all into it in the background, and Tally swept through. I think Michael Talianchis just grabbed 4 spots on the run through 1, 2, 3, and 4 and 5 that lap.
Yeah, he did. He picked the right line. He went flat through that while a few of them got sideways, made a bit of contact down at Tessita del Lago, and then, of course, that came from the checkup we saw through turns 1 and 2. Fewens and Nitschke, those two have battled a couple of times in this. Talianchis the one to watch, right? Yeah, count them. All right, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I think he made one a little earlier as well in that lap.
And he's kept it clean. He's kept it clean out of the other side of things. It takes an experienced campaigner to cut his way through the field like that. It's keep it clean. He's going to get back inside the top 20. We're going to have 7 laps left to run when we get back to the start-finish line this time by for this little battle group. And I'll run up and have a look at this battle between Mark Poynton now as we get back inside the top 10. Greg Sharp was having a little bit of a go at him. These guys sit inside the top 10. And how about Brad Doble as well? First ever season in the V8 Veterans. He's been finding his way a little bit the last couple of weeks. Round 4, sneaks inside that 10 there, Dave. Up to 7th. That is a very, very good drive from Brad Doble at the moment.
Yeah, from qualifying 11th. And still just giving Chris Miller a little bit to think about. Now, those two were real close to each other at the end of the last pit stop phase, and they've remained pretty close all through this one.
Well, I wonder whether or not Brad Doble's got enough fuel on board and Chris Miller underfueled slightly just to get a little bit of track position because he's making time relative. Now, Miller's actually got the fresher rubber is the big key, but the other side of the coin is that Chris Miller's now offering a tow to Brad Doble, so that is some of the margin. So it's going to be a battle for this position on the road in the last couple of laps. Matt Vanderkrant and Travis Hunt still haven't decided things up ahead either, but the top 3 are basically all said and all done, so there's not a huge deal to talk about. Where's John Latham fallen to? Driven back through to 29th on the road as it currently stands. It's one of the early stoppers for that final stint to go over a little bit of track position, so he filled a 35th spot, I think, early in the running of the race with damage and driven back through to 29th.
And then Rob Crisdale is in the 28th, so those two are 28th and 29th. They're very, very, very early stoppers. Crisdale went for the much longer middle stint, though, to try to bring back on schedule for this final stint and not be just a sitting duck, 10-lap holder tyres and everyone else around. But still, it hasn't quite shook out how I think he would have hoped.
You know what's a really interesting thing to contemplate? Now, we documented Michael Talianchic's issues, but Brent Nitschke, remember, had a drive-through penalty very early on in the piece. Taliancic started out of 2nd position, sits 20th. Nitschke out of 4th and sits 19th. That is what one mistake will cost you in this field.
Yeah, and then the track position, the battling, everything that's gone with that since. It puts you out of place very early in the race, and then that can kind of continue to compound.
But with 5.5 laps left to run, time starting to run out as it is, getting aggressive in and around this 20th spot on the racetrack.
And I just reckon up front that Delaney's done a good job since the last pit stop 10 laps ago, just to keep Scott Gamble honest. Delaney came out of that stop 5 seconds behind Gamble, and now it's 6.2, 10 laps later. It's just, yeah, you look at those, 2/10, less than 1/10. Just making sure that Scott Gamble has to keep working and keeping him honest about this.
Yeah, and for Gamble, he set sail early on in the night, and we haven't sort of really seen him ever since. He's done a phenomenal job of pushing out there yet again. Defending champion, I think he's about to start running away with it as it stands. Travis Hunt, Matt Vanderkraan are still going at each other. Vanderkraan's just not able to sort of get closer than about 2 to 3 tenths of a second at the moment. So it's about 4.5 as they run up the hill right here, and then a little bit in behind. And Chris Miller, Brad Doble sort of stagnated a little bit again. I think there might have been a mistake for Doble. He lost a little bit of ground on that most recent lap. He's making it up again in the first sectors this time.
Middle part of the lap, you've got quite a few slow corner traction zones here uphill, and then through the next right-hander on the exit here as well. You want to straighten the car up for the throttle, and once the tyres start getting away from you, there are a couple of corners through here that'll just begin to punish you. Let the driver behind get closer, maybe get a better run off the corner than you, and suddenly then you're under pressure. You might see some more movement happen heading into 4 laps to go.
How about the view from Michael Stewart's on board at the moment, because he's working incredibly hard. 3 drivers on the road, all within spitting distance for him. He can have a definite crack at them if he can get close enough, but they're just doing enough to keep that margin out far enough ahead. And as they tip it down through turn 1, turn 2, you can just see he's not quite getting the drive that he necessarily needed to. He's got to be making margin right now, Dave. That's the key. With 4 laps left to run, he's got to touch closer. He's better on brakes on the run down to turn number 4, but he's got to make margin somewhere.
And he had David Nash right towards his rear bumper. Nash had a half slide at the top of the Ferradura, dropped sort of 3-4 seconds back. Well, the Nash attack is back on, closing in on this next group as well. You see Cairns looks like he's going defensive, but actually he's having a look at Greg Sharp, and they're going to be side by side down here.
Now it is on. Damien Cairns and Greg Sharp are going to get side by side, and Greg Sharp still managed to hang on to things. That will present an opportunity for Stewart. Tries to get to the inside, gets it covered. Now David Nash is going to have a look at a crisscross for him. Not quite, a little bit of a touch into the rear bar as they come off of turn number 10. The run down the hill through 11, and 3 more laps left to run. Time is starting to run out. 4 kilometres in the lap, 4.3 kilometres in the lap, so it's going to be about 13 k's left to run from here.
Still got Nash as my driver to watch in this. 4 tenths quicker than the group in front last lap. Obviously quicker than them as they battled on the lap that we're just about to complete here, and he's got a few laps to still try to make some spots, make some gains here as they get side by side and sort of jockey with each other in front. He's the driver with more grip.
Now they start to try and hang on to things, and for Nash, opportunities running out. Can't just get a little bit closer. Mark Poynton's taken an opportunity just to run away with this one. Sits himself in 8th and sits quite comfortably, and Talianchich goes ahead and picks another driver off, which is Brenton Nietzsche. Now he'll give himself 2.5 laps to try and get onto the rear bumper of Jason Fewens and grab another spot. Potentially a few still on the offering up ahead. So as the race starts to run out, all of a sudden it starts to get exciting once again.
Indeed, those who sort of stopped earlier, had their little undercut, now sort of made that bed and got to lie in it for a couple more laps. And that's when, you know, what you get early in the stint, you got to give back later.
Still dicing for positions as Varga trying to defend there from Matty Parker and have a look at Jamie McKnight just ahead of him. Our race leader's already run by the start-finish line, meaning it's less than 2 laps left for him, but it's this middle part of the lap, 2.5 or so laps to go for quite a number of drivers, and that battle pack for 9th through to 14th is still on the cards as well, not quite resolved. And David Nash is starting to come under a little bit of a pressure. They're going to run down to turn number 1. I think we've got to keep an eye on this battle pack as everyone's starting to cross the road, left, right, and centre. Michael Stewart's going to have a crack to go around the outside of Damien Cairns. Gets there. They are 3 wide on the run into turn number 1. Nash got a little bit checked up. Cairns got the car parked up very, very nicely. Did get that spot back. So it's Stewart who was deep on the brakes. And now they are 2 laps left to go for this little battle pack. And Stewart gets a whack from Nash into the fence. That's going to rip off the front left tyre, and his night is going to be done.
Stewart tried to stay tight and he had to get out of the throttle, and then he got hit by behind the freight train from Nash.
Well, I'll tell you what, he's actually gotten out of it okay. The car is still relatively okay, but it's... Oh, sorry, it is mechanical black flag, but there's 2 laps left, so it won't matter. He can still make the finish from here. The difficulty now is how much more aggressive, and David Nash, tricky opportunity. We'll get another opportunity to have a quick look at a replay if we can, but we've got to make it quick with how little racing is left, because these guys are fighting for everything.
It's here through turn 3, isn't it? So Nash is trying to get a run. Looks to the inside. Stewart either has a slide or cracks the throttle, because he begins to slow up there.
How good was the run down at turn number 1? And this is the run on board from David Nash that'll tell us a little bit more of the story. I think there is a wiggle. So there's a wiggle there. He's out of the groove, and then he sort of checks. He tries to cut back to the left, and that's what's got him in trouble a little bit. Anyway, well, it's all done for now. Michael Stewart's going to fall outside the top 10, and that's now going to leave an opportunity for quite a number of drivers. So Nash gets up to 11, still on the rear bumper now of Damien Cairns, and looking to try and have a crack at him, and Cairns held him up, propped him up through turn 1. These are the battles that we're looking at. And the final lap of the race, by the way, to keep you in the back of your mind, this is the run down at turn number 4 for the final time. Damien Cairns is going to have to go defensive because David Nash has got a really, really good run. And I tell you what, Christian Smart's had a big old dive at them in the background of this one. You just can't see. The run down at turn number 4. David Nash had to run it wide to give Christian Smart just enough space. That's prevented him from having a crack at Damien Cairns just up the road. So not quite decided this one.
Taliantic has been in a wreck.
Oh, no!
All happening. Gamble about to take that checkered flag, but it's fireworks all the way to the end.
It is going to be fireworks at the tail end. Scott Gamble put it on pole, led just about every lap across the night bar in the pit cycle, has looked supremely comfortable, gets to the line and gets the job done. He's going to win another race from Blake Delaney out of the final corner on the run down to the flag, and Michael Whiting brings it home.
Delaney took a really short second fill, and his pace has hit a cliff the last couple of laps, but he's just held on to that second from Michael Whiting.
And there's still going to be a run out to the flag, as well as Travis Hunt just barely brings it home ahead of Matt Van der Kraan, who had to swing at him at the flag. Is that Chris Miller out of field? No, just enough to get that one home over Brad Doble, come home in 7th. And the battle pack that we're looking at the tail end of the top 10, Damien Cairns is going to manage to finish inside 10th spot ahead of David Nash and Christian Smart. That battle went on at the tail end of the race as well. And it's outside the 20 as we deeply look back to Jamie Knight, who's picked up quite a few spots. I think there's post-race black flags here for a number of drivers for incident point penalties, and Michael Taliancic is among them.
Yeah, I hope we get an opportunity, because I basically only saw what you saw, is that he was on the outside of turn 4 or somewhere else, and, you know, he was working his way back through the field, and then he'd made a couple of smart moves through the traffic.
Ooh, it kicked off on the way in. And that is Jason Fewens.
But then it doesn't stop because that happens.
So Fewens puts the squeeze on him, but there's enough room right now.
Like Ferrari teammates.
And there's room all the way to the apex, and they just kept getting sucked back together, and then Nitschke's got nowhere to go. Tricky to have a look at. So for Jason Fewens, looking at the markers and looking at your guidance, he does come to the right a fraction. They just keep touching and everyone wiggles and then they're into each other. And there is the difficulty in that one, David Haynes, is there is so little movement from either one. It's not meant to be egregious, it's not meant to be massive, but it has massive implications.
Yeah, they're 10 millimeters apart, and then each of them move 5 millimeters. And it's like tectonic plates colliding. They're both unstoppable, but at very slow closing speed.
Yeah, and we all know what happens when tectonic plates don't get along. We end up
subduction?
with earthquake. Yeah, subduction. That's the one where one slides up over the other.
I don't know. I just wanted to sound smart because that was the first thing I could think of.
You're correct. It's a geological term, so I'll give you that. Righto, race results. Scotty Gamble gets it home and gets the job done from Blake Delaney, from Michael Whiting. Travis Hunt will have an okay night at the office, finishing 4th, and he'll sit there and go, yeah, you know what, that wasn't too bad. Matt Van der Krung crosses the line in 5th. Reasonable, kept it clean, and that was the big old key for the 180 machine. Chris Miller gets it home in 6th spot, advanced his position quite nicely as the night progressed. And how about this result for Brad Doble? 11th through to 7th, had a great night at the office. First season in the V8 Veterans, found his way, found it quite nicely. Mark Poynton is making a habit of this, moves from 19th on the grid all the way up to 8th inside the top 10, 11 spots gained for him. Greg Sharp, 13th tonight, will be happy with the top 10, and Damien Cairns gets home in 10th. David Nash home in 11th from Christian Smart. Contact between Nash and a few drivers. Christian Smart, Robbie Griffiths. Michael Stewart would be upset and unhappy with 14th. They had a phenomenal race. It was interesting to watch. Chad Lewis, man, that was going to be a really good finish for him. Somewhere around 6th or 7th place for Chad Lewis. Becomes 15th. Mistake on the pit lane entry. Dean Flavel, the dyno, was working over a little bit. Don't know if he got room for a zinger box in that one. From Darren Crosby, Jason Fewens home in 18th spot. Contact on the final lap of the race. Jamie McKnight from Stephen Varga there, Haynes.
So, Matty Parker, Brenton Nitschke, Stephen Kennedy, Stewie Hall, Darren Goosey, Scott McCune, Robert Crisdale, John Latham, Gary Buckland, and David Kirby are the drivers to 30th place. Still all on the lead lap, which is about 90 seconds around here. Same for Jim Caparonis, Paul Burns, Shane Randall, and Mike Taliancic stays on the lead lap because he was on the lead lap, and it was the final lap of the race when that drama unfolded. Chris Blanchard ends up a lap down, and then Glenn Corbett and Craig Friend are the drivers with closer to retirements or significant laps down.
And that is everyone as they cross the line here tonight. We're going to get straight on into the interviews and the end result. David Haynes, we were 76 calories away from a zinger box.
That's even with a Pepsi Max, because it's way out of budget once you go to a Sunkist or any of those other beverages. So for shame, but that maybe you just got to wait for one of those 250k enduros.
Righto, we're going to start from the top end of the podium and chat to the driver who's managed to pick up another race win. He's making a little bit of a habit at this at the moment, driving supremely. Number 1 machine, Scotty Gamble, put it on pole, got a good start, checked out. Nice easy night at the office for you.
Yeah, there you go, Scotty, and the guys there, yeah, it ended up working out all right, mate. We got a little bit of a gap there, and yeah, it was just try to maintain it to Tally. I thought he was fast, so especially through turn 4 and 5, he was faster than me through there. So I was just trying to maintain a gap and then see what happened in the last stop, but he must have picked up a penalty or something like that. But otherwise, yeah, it was good fun. Had to concentrate a fair bit, and yeah, glad to come away with the win.
A little bit of a tough racetrack when you come here to Interlagos. Just managing the tyres because of the elevation changes. The braking cadence that's required to get this place right is a real... And it's not just you sit down and you go, okay, I know what it feels like. It's muscle memory. You do kind of have to think about it a fair bit around this place as the run progresses.
Yeah, absolutely. In the first, from the start there, I actually had a big lock-up on the right front there, and I was dirty with myself because I knew that was going to compromise my tyres for the rest of that stint. And yeah, so you're absolutely right. Really have to manage your tyres and lean on them at the right times, give them a bit of a rest at others, and see if you can get them back under you to just get some consistent lap times in and hope others make some mistakes,
Mate, you've been the king of consistency thus far throughout the season as well. You look like you're feeling really, really confident, and things are just gelling. Obviously, we talked you needed a break at some point last year, but I think the relationship that you're finding yourself in at the 9.5 garage, I think that's helping because you look happier this season. You sound happier. I think that relationship is really working for you.
Yeah, it is. They're a great bunch of guys there. It's not an absolute big team, but it's, there's a few guys in there, varied interests, and, they're always nice, polite, real great bunch of guys to be around and to be part of, Scotty, and to be in that team. So I feel kind of honoured that Sean, the team boss, took me on in there, and yeah, so I'm actually enjoying my time there. Shame he wasn't racing tonight, but I'm sure we'll see him back next week or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, interesting to note as well. I think when we looked at you a few times throughout the evening, which wasn't very often here tonight, you've been working on that game face, the jaws not hanging open as well. Yeah, I get the feeling you heard those comments.
Yeah, I heard him in, what was it, round 1 or something like this, but or maybe round 2, but working on it. I might have had a bit of congestion that night, Scotty, that's what I'm going with. I had to breathe through my mouth.
Mate, congratulations on the race result. Another win for you, and who's the people you'd like to thank, mate?
Yeah, look, first and foremost, I'd like to thank RaceKraft. They sponsor the league. They tuned in last week, or John did there from RaceKraft, and they sponsor our team. So thank you very much, John. Same as RSW Graphics. Ross, he tuned in last week, so they're supporting the vets in the broadcast, the SimSpeed broadcast, which is really good to see sponsors on board doing that. So big shout out to them and really appreciate it. So on top of them as well, we've got Turn-In Apparel, Racing Ears and Prestige Cinematography. That's what make it over at Night 5 Sim Sports. And to you guys over at SimSpeed, absolutely love your broadcast. You know I'm always watching or get back onto the repeat, and even my missus is involved, mate. She loves it too. So thank you to them, and to Blake and Michael. Well done, well driven to Tally. Unfortunate, but how well is Travis Hunt and Matt Vanderkraan driving? They're driving really well at the moment. So kudos to them too.
Mate, congratulations on the race result. Enjoy another win, and just keep enjoying your racing. You look like you're having so much fun this season. That's good to see. Oh, I dragged him out a little bit too quickly. Sorry, Scotty. I kicked you out of the commentary box. I said, you're having fun, mate. Good to see. It's really, really good to see the smile on your face, brother.
Thanks, mate. See you.
We'll take one step further down the podium, and we're going to be chatting. David Haynes has got Blake Delaney on standby. Hainesy, over to you.
Well, congrats on the podium finish, starting from outside of the top 3, making a few gains there, Blake, and sort of an interesting fuel strategy yourself compared to those around you. Big drink at the first stop.
Yeah, I don't know, mate. I was not planning on taking as much as I did, but anyway, I did ended up taking too much. I think I took 75 litres at the first one. I was planning to try and save on the second one. I just couldn't hang on to Tally out of the stop because I just took too much fuel. So it is what it is. But good fun race.
Juggling act in these cars, of course, not just managing, the fuel stint, but then how that relates to your tire age, your grip, your race pace, your track position, all of that. So how many sliding beads are there on your strategy abacus for a race format like this?
Well, we don't have an abacus. The only person in the team has an abacus is David Kirby. He's right up the alley of the abacus. But tonight, I felt like, I just said to Mike, I felt like I was a lot quicker when I was saving, which was quite annoying, to be honest, because came out of the pits 5 or 6 seconds behind Scotty at the end. Not that I was thinking that I was going to get him. He's a lot faster than what I am, but did a little bit more practice this week and sort of opened up the strategy a bit for us, which was awesome.
And that second drink of fuel, maybe just a tiny bit short?
Yep, for sure. Always going to be, though, because I was concerned about Tally. Pushed out of the pits quite hard and then realised that he'd made a significant error, I think, in the pits. I think he overshot the entry.
Yes, indeed. He was speeding on the entry.
Yeah, for sure. So, look, definitely it was always going to take not much on the last. I was hoping to just cover tyres, but ended up having to take 23 litres. Didn't save enough in the first stint, so it is what it is. But hey, it was an awesome race. We had a lot of fun. It's great to race with the Fishy Boys. Big shout out to Christian Smart, who was up 23 spots or something like that tonight, which was unreal.
22. Let's be realistic.
Yeah. No, what a drive. That's pretty cool, hey.
And then that last thing on the strategy abacus, relatively cool track temperatures for sort of high grip, late braking zones, low deg in theory.
Yeah, absolutely. Love the track. It really helped saving because the degradation was very minimal. Allowed for a bit of a push later on in the stint, but like I said before, unfortunately, I just didn't save enough and took not enough fuel, so I couldn't really push at the end. But the degradation around here is pretty cool. As the fuel comes off, it sort of evens itself out, which is it's a great track to race on. Awesome in the draft. as you probably saw, I hope it was a pretty good race, a bit boring up the front, but I hope it was a bit of a cool race at the back to watch for the broadcast. But it's good when there's a bit of a draft train. There's always plenty of moves being done, so I hope it was a good broadcast to watch.
Yeah, pretty close all through that midfield, and I think 1 second in qualifying took us from pole to about 24th place. So when you've got, a field that's that close on pace, it's always going to be a couple of spot fires and packs through the middle. And once you got to that midpoint of the race, I guess the track and the traffic sort of opened up a little more for you than the rest of the field.
Oh, absolutely. Once there was a bit of a gap behind, I think it was Mark who was sitting behind me in the second stint, and he was able to follow for, I reckon, about 7 or 8 laps, which was actually quite frustrating because I thought I'd dropped a fair bit of pace, but it turned out the middle stint wasn't as quick as what the last stint was. But once the field started moving out, the trains definitely spread out a little bit. It's hard to stay up with someone at this place without a draft, so definitely a draft track, definitely good for people who are 1 or 2 tenths off the pace like me, sitting behind Michael Talianic at the start. So that was allowing me to keep up with him. But Scotty and Michael were just way too fast, and those boys, they obviously do a bit more practice than what I do. So I'd love to do a bit more. Just work commitments make it difficult.
Well, a couple spots gained through the race. No spots lost in the final stint. A podium for you. Who'd you like to thank?
Yeah. Awesome race by all the boys at Fishy. Unfortunately, Kirby had a bit of a challenge tonight, but we had a good bit of fun on the stream. So for those of you out there, jump on the stream and have a bit of a look. It's a bit of a laugh for us on Discord. Great with mates, and we love it. Thanks to all the Fishy boys. West End Motor Group, which is Parramatta Peugeot Professional, Parramatta City Great Wall, West End Marriott to Parramatta Isuzu Ute, DC Shades, Precision Sim Training, Infinity Designs, Battery Warehouse, Early Beach, and massive shout out to Mr. Whiting, who lines up in, or has lined up all year in the Pro Series and is doing a good job. Good luck to the Enduros, big fella.
There we go, Scott. From second on the podium, you'll have one more.
Yeah, that's going to be the conversation with Michael Whiting, who's been a busy man in terms of his racing exploits of late. Michael, you look like you enjoyed that race. There was a lot of strategizing, particularly the place where you were, particularly in that second stint. You fell quite a few places further back. A lot of fuel on that first stop. You just sort of had to just keep picking away, going, yep, we're taking this pain early on. The gain's coming.
Yeah, look, I probably should have taken a little bit less fuel. It would have put me right in the draft train, and not being in the draft around there sort of hurt the fuel strategy quite a fair bit. And trying to catch guys in the draft when you're not in the draft is near on impossible. So if I had taken maybe 5-10 litres left, I would have been right there. I think the result might have been a little bit different if Tally, I think he might have got a stop and hold for speeding in pit lane. So I think the outcome may have been potentially quite a bit different if things had played out the way I thought they were going to go.
Hey, mate, that's racing, right? So luck's sometimes got to fall your way. It's the same with cricket, right? Sometimes you hit a catch up in the air and it falls in the middle of 5 fielders all standing there and looking at it, and sometimes it goes straight into hand. Interlagos, from a mental perspective, I think for a 200-kilometre race tonight, that was actually reasonably challenging to add strategy on top of that, as the series does. I think this is a testing. Obviously, the car is always very, very testing, but that combination looked like it tested quite a few drivers.
Yeah, that circuit's very hard on the tyres in the supercar, especially turn 3, I think it is. There's a couple of big sweeping corners that really strain the tyres, so it's really tyre management through the race. And you sort of base your fuel strategy around when you think the tyres are going to go off. And then obviously pit when required, or if there's safety cars, then obviously you pit them, but we didn't have any of those tonight. So yeah, it's really a case of looking after the tyre around that track.
Mate, from your perspective, the championship's going quite well, sitting in third place at the moment. Results are sort of starting to chain together. I get the feeling that you are obviously being in the Pro Series at the moment. It feels like you're driving a little bit more, and I think the results are sort of reflecting that. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would tend to agree. There's a lot more practice. The guys in the Pro Series are mega quick, so even just trying to keep up with them is a challenge in itself. Scops is here this weekend as well. And then obviously veterans every week. So there's a lot of practice, a lot of driving the supercar. It all comes down to seat time. The more you're in it, the more you get used to it. You know what it can and can't do, and you can get better at fuel saving and managing tyres and things like that. So it all helps.
Mate, and finally, I'm going to leave the floor all up to you to thank everyone that makes it possible for you and the team.
Obviously, the guys at Fishy Motorsport. Without them, the team wouldn't be what it is. West End Motor Group, DC Shades, Battery Warehouse, Early Beach, Infinity Designs, all the sponsors that support the team.
And mate, finally, the age-old joke that comes out of Fishy Motorsports. Have you had another birthday? Is this, what, the third time this month?
No, it was actually Coleman's during the week for a change. So it was his actual birthday, not the 16 others that he has during the year.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Michael. Enjoyed chatting to you as usual, mate, and see you again next week.
Cheers, guys.
Well, David Haynes, that is going to bring us down to our Driver of the Day nomination, and it's actually that man he just mentioned, David Coleman, brought in as a part of the administration duties to the argument. Our Chubby Buns Driver of the Day is going to go to the man who finished in 7th place here tonight. Brad Doble making his V8 Veterans debut here in season number 20. Started out of 11th. Qualifying performance has improved him significantly for the first couple of rounds, but it's qualifying was okay. Reasonable, continued to progress as that race went on, and you know, rookie drive in a series like this, to be inside that top 10 fills you with confidence, and that's why we're giving him Driver of the Day today.
Yeah, and the 3 stints for him were 12 laps, 18 laps, 17 laps. So after the first stop, a little on the earlier side, made really good use of that to get the track position, kept it clean, which was super important.
Yeah, indeed, and critically, it's that cleanliness that he's looking for. And when you step into a new league, when you're not racing along drivers you necessarily are incredibly used to, you just don't have that understanding of what they're going to do on the brakes. And Brad has done a phenomenal job to finish inside the top 10, so that's why he has been awarded the Chubby Buns Driver of the Day.
He wins the Dobell Prize.
We finally got the pun in. That's taken us way too long. I'm disappointed in both of us, Dave, that it took us that long. Anyway, ladies and gents, that is going to wrap us up here tonight from Interlagos. Next week, we are going to take a journey back into the Americas, the northern part of the Americas. As it stands, Daytona Road Course gave us the biggest ever battle graphic that we have had as a part of the SimSpeed coverage. Will that happen again as draft training action reigns supreme at the self-titled home of motorsport? Daytona Road Course will play host to round number 5 of the V8 Veterans season number 20. Join us next week from 8:30 p.m. for all of your coverage. And finally, a big shout out to the sponsors that make it possible here for all the coverage for the V8 Veterans. Your title sponsor for season number 20 once again is RaceKraft Simulations. From John and the team, they make it possible here for the V8 Veterans to go racing and do what they want. Player One Sim Gear, I want to say a huge shout out to Player One Sim Gear. They stepped up this week and offered a driver who's competing in the Formula 4 Challenge down in Melbourne in August, the opportunity to practice on the gear that they'll be driving on in that event. So they've done a phenomenal thing to stand up and give that driver an opportunity. To Nova Simsport, Logitech G, Parramatta Isuzu, Ute, Chubby Buns, who are sponsoring Driver of the Day, and SimSpeed, who have come on board this season as well. V8 Veterans is not possible without all the sponsors on that list, chief among them RaceKraft Simulations. And like I said, I want to say a big shout out to something that didn't have to happen from the team at Player One Sim Gear, but they made it happen because they wanted to give a driver every opportunity to compete on that gear. So ladies and gentlemen, that is going to wrap us up here from the Daytona from Interlagos. We'll go to Daytona Road Course next Thursday night, and we'll see you all then for more racing action from the V8 Veterans community.
Racing isn't easy, but experiencing it is. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat with the industry's leading sim racing game. Drive on laser scan replicas of the greatest racing circuits from around the world. Go head-to-head against other drivers chosen by skill-based matchmaking to ensure competitive racing at every level. Compete across all your favorite series. In officially licensed cars, engineered to deliver the most accurate driving experience possible. Join a race or host your own with players from across the globe. Race against the computer or in a league with friends. Feel the thrill behind the wheel. visit iRacing.com.